do you see Bitcoin as like an interloper?
Well, the big problem I have with Bitcoin is
the idea that the U.S. Treasury could buy Bitcoin and hold it as an asset. They may not be able to buy enough of it. You probably no scenario you can carry $100 million in gold in your car somewhere. But I'm telling you, if Bitcoin gets to that sort of a value level because of crisis, there's no power.
Do you think that the price of gold is reflecting somewhat how global central banks are stockpiling gold at this point in time?
central banks, I think, are stockpiling it for two reasons. One is
Welcome to the Futures Edge show. I am Bob Iaccino. We are Finance Unfiltered. Normally, Jim Iuorio is here giving you this intro, but I don't like him, so I didn't want him to come today. Well, that's not true. It is true that I don't like him, but he's got a little problem. He'll be here as soon as he can. The first thing I want to do is give a quick shout out to Hardcore Italians, which does sponsor the show, Brian. In case you didn't know, I'm wearing a shirt that says mozzarella. It's one of their shirts. I've actually got one of their hats on my desk here too. It's their Italian-American flag hat because you got two guys with vowels on the end of their name doing the show here. But if you want 15% off at Hardcore Italian, they have stuff for non-Italians too. My wife is not Italian, therefore her father is not Italian. That math works. And I got her a I'm not Italian but supportive shirt. And then I got my father-in-law and I identify as Italian shirt. So if you're Italian, you want to buy stuff where people are not Italian, use our link, which is a Futures Edge Finance Unfiltered as your coupon code. That'll give you 15% off. I know it's long, but you can copy and paste it from somewhere in the show. Otherwise, find us on Twitter. We'll put it up there as well. We have Brien Lundin with us today. And by saying we, I mean Jim is anticipated to be here. Brien is the editor of the Gold Newsletter. He is also the host of the New Orleans Investment Conference. Brien, thank you so much for being here. You were here last year prior to the conference, and we're doing the same thing again. Can you talk first about the conference? What is it? I know you get great guests. Our late friend Jim Iuorio is one of those. So tell us about the conference.
Yeah, it's actually the oldest or longest running retail investment event, probably the oldest running investment event in the world today. This is our 50th anniversary. It was started by my mentor in the industry, late employer, and eventually business partner, Jim Blanchard. Started it in 1974 because he had successfully lobbied to get the right of gold ownership, private gold ownership, returned to American citizens in 1974. So he decided to have a conference to teach American investors, U.S. investors, how to buy gold, how to invest in it, and started it in 1974. And over the years, he and subsequently I have tried to get some of the best minds in the modern world to speak at our conference. I think it's generally accepted that we've succeeded in that. We've had everyone from Ayn Rand in her last public speaking engagement to Margaret Thatcher, Alan Greenspan, Barry Goldwater. The list goes on and on and on. Milton Friedman, numerous times, F.A. Hayek, et cetera, et cetera. So we are the longest running investment event, but we've always had that heritage of gold and sound money and advocating for sound money, free minds, free markets kind of a thing. So you would not be surprised to learn that our audience has typically been libertarian/conservative, but we try to present all sides of the story. We cover geopolitics, macroeconomics with great minds, and then we drill down into the various investment markets. So it's an incredible, intellectually stimulating, highly entertaining for over 4 days in New Orleans. So it's a lot of fun as well. But the quality of the speakers is what really sets us apart.
Give the way that people can find the New Orleans Investment Conference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Can't miss the pitch. It is NewOrleansConference.com is the place to go. NewOrleansConference.com. very simple. It's November 20th to 23rd this year. That's the week before the week of Thanksgiving, so it doesn't really conflict with it. And we've got a great lineup of speakers. And in addition to Jim, we've got James Grant, we've got Brent Johnson, George Gammon, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Dave Collum, Rick Rule. Just go to our website and see. It's just really a stellar faculty this year.
Well, I think that list is important because more than half of those names you mentioned have actually been here on this show, including yourself. So that's always a good thing. We've actually got Danielle coming back on soon, and we got to get Dave back on. We've had Dave. I think Dave has been Dave Collum, I'm talking about, has been our most frequent guest. We've also had Brent Johnson on before. So you mentioned something about your audience. I'm just going to use my own words and say leans conservative. Mm-hmm. Recently, I started doing a lot of speaking just in small snippets for clients and for investors about gold specifically. I went full on, I don't want to say gold bug because I'm not somebody that believes in gold 24/7, 365 days a year, but I do believe in it as a real asset class. I don't look at it as novelty like some people say that, time for gold is now and then there's a time where you should have no gold. I think you should always have some. I went heavy gold in November 2022 for very specific reasons. And when I started doing public speeches on why I did that, because I got a lot of requests because I did it on a news media interview where they told me what my trade for 2023 was. And I said it was gold. And I said it was a risk-adjusted trade. Worked out well. I said the same thing for 2024. I do a interview with a specific outlet every year at the end of the year where they're asking me for my trade for the next year. And I started getting accused of being one of those Fox News gold pitchmen. Mm-hmm. Now, I do appear on Fox. I appear on Neil Cavuto's show quite a bit, but I also do Bloomberg and I also do Yahoo News, neither one of which doesn't even get a hint of leaning right. And I still believe in gold. Why do you think that the left side of the policy and political spectrum somehow equates gold with conservatism?
Well, because the left side is trusting in government and in economic management by the elites and those who know better, determining the proper course of the economy and not the free market, not the millions of people acting independently in their own behalf. So it's really kind of antithetical toward, generally speaking, collectivism. And gold is essentially freedom. It's independence from all of that meddling in your life and the economy and everything else that typically the left believes in. Interestingly, it's fairly common knowledge, at least among us, that libertarianism is the mix between liberals and conservatives. We're liberal socially and conservative fiscally, but even those definitions aren't sufficient and get blurred a bit. So yeah, I think that's it. Governments have always throughout human history mismanaged the economy. Ancient Rome has just been the perfect allegory for the U.S. in so many different ways. It was literally military campaigns and adventurism. It was entitlements that sank the Roman Empire and resulted in the depreciation of the Roman denarius. And if you plot the depreciation of the Roman denarius against the depreciation in the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar since 1960, it is a virtual match. Yeah. So, history rhymes very closely. And, there are a lot of rhymes we can talk about right now. But yeah, gold is your insurance against precisely what the left often advocates.
Well, I want to bring Jim in because he made it here, which we're really excited about.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, there's no sarcasm in that at all. But I did want to point out to those that, my other ultra-conservative MAGA Trumper friend, Jim, which I'm saying that sarcastically, he also is a believer in gold. And I've also owned pot stocks for those people on the left that watch our show, which there's probably none. But I've also owned pot stocks. So I don't know how, whatever. Jimmy?
So first of all, I gave myself an hour and 25 minutes to get home. You guys can hear me? There was a massive accident on the Kenny. I'm sorry. First of all, Bobby, By the way, that question was fantastic about conservatism in gold, because I've never
It's
actually
so dumb.
considered that. The last time we had you on the show, you turned me on to something, and it was a huge takeaway for me. Because as you know, as everyone who's watching knows too, Bobby and I have been long gold. I am significantly long gold for several years. And by the way, it's one of the only assets that we've taken very little heat on the whole time. I'm knocking on wood because that's the kiss of death usually. But you told me something that I hadn't thought of, and I should have thought of it being a futures trader and an options trader. You're like, well, sure, you can return a trade on gold if you return a rate on gold. If you own gold, like I do, but I'm owning gold, I want the explosive upside move. I don't care that much about the grinding move, and you can get a return on it by selling options. So I've been selling call spreads against my gold this entire time. And again, it's been mostly a wash because oftentimes I lose some money on a little bit of money on the call spread because it's been grinding up so high. But I wanted you to appreciate that I took that to heart. And can you elaborate it on to some people, particularly even if you own physical gold?
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst thing that would happen if you're long gold and you sell call options? You get the gold called, right?
Yeah, but I
And
have
you,
call spreads, so I'm not even getting gold called because I
yeah,
sell a call
yeah.
and buy a call.
So,
Yeah,
so you can take a return in the meantime, and once you're taken out of the market, you just get back in.
you just get back in. Right. And if
Yeah.
it's in a tax-free account, which it is, and I'm actually even writing call spreads on gold that I physically own now. So,
Hmm.
but anyway, so here's my question to you about gold, because I think part of the move higher, like for several years, 1800 to 2000 was a pretty well-defined range. Then all of a sudden, the dollars that we have in our pockets are devalued by the tune of about 30%. So let's say the dollar is now 70% of what it was before. So it would just stand to reason that gold, which is a direct reflection of that, clicks up to a new range. That new range to me was like 2,300. I thought it was to 2,500, and it was in that range, and now it's broken out to the upside. And I think part of that is the realization that both candidates are profligate spenders, and that the rest of the world is de-dollarization will take decades. De-dollarization is in its infant stages, and everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And there's been no real crisis for these guys to say that they don't want dollars anymore. My question is this: do you think that the price of gold is reflecting somewhat how global central banks are stockpiling gold at this point in time?
Yeah, I think well, for the same reasons that global central banks are stockpiling gold. I mean, the central banks, I think, are stockpiling it for two reasons. One is just they want to get away from, gain independence from the dollar, because you look at the rate of central bank gold purchases, and it spiked, not coincidentally, right after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the sanctions thereof. So they want to get out from under, or gain some independence from the dollar fiscal regime. So that's one reason. The other reason is central banks, as perhaps no other, understand what they've done over the last 4 decades of ever easier money, which then prompted ever greater debts and the accumulation of those debts. We were just talking about the analogy with ancient Rome. The trend is clear. We don't know the timing necessarily, but we know the trend is clear. And if the only way out of these debts is by significant depreciation of the currencies in which they're denominated. That's never a strategy. It's always your back's up against the wall, the gun's against your head. What do we do to pay the bills this month? Kind of a thing. It is a last resort, but it demands the depreciation of those currencies, or else everything falls apart. So central banks realize that. I think the primary motivation right now is to get out from under the umbrella of the U.S. dollar as much as possible.
Brien, we talk about the sort of safety of gold, right? And the ability of it to sort of protect us in a lot of different sort of extreme circumstances. And then the return on gold in circumstances that are not so extreme. I think the three of us might agree that fiscally we're in a pretty extreme scenario right now, but that's beside the point. The US government has seized retail gold, right? Where do actually each one of you fall? Because one of the reasons that I shouldn't say this, keep gold at the house is I don't think the government can seize it from me at the house. I think they'd have a really hard time. And if they actually got it, you guys might be talking about what a great guy I was.
Remember when he threatened you with an F-15, by the way? He literally came on and said, what do you mean your guns are to fight the government? We have F-15s. By the way,
Yeah.
I have hiding places and guns. But anyway, Brien, that question's to you.
Well, that goes to the durability of gold. I guess they dig through the rubble because an F-15 would hurt gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the question?
So the question is, when people say, well, yeah, I mean, gold protects us, but the government has seized gold before.
Oh, yeah, they didn't technically confiscate it. It was a forced sale. And what's interesting, in recent years, there's been some research. It was always assumed that there were good citizens back in 1933 when FDR said, turn in all your gold, and everybody turned in their gold. But there has been some research showing that there was actually very little taking up of that, relatively little, that citizens actually turned in their gold. But then again, their gold was mostly in banks, as it were, or their dollars represented gold at the same time. Right. So the FDR knew that he was going to have to devalue the dollar. So he then, after steering the Titanic toward the iceberg, threw all of the life reservists and lifeboats overboard. He told all the citizens they couldn't own gold anymore. He paid $20 and I think 67 cents for each ounce of gold. And then once he got all the gold, he raised the price to $35 an ounce, having the dollar still technically backed by gold. So he devalued the dollar by 69%. But in the meantime, had taken away all of the citizens' ability to protect themselves from that devaluation. It was really quite sinister the way he did it. But it wasn't a direct confiscation. Now, I do not think that that's going to happen again. I think we've come so far, it would be very difficult for the government to do that. And if they did that, then they would have to recognize the official world price of gold. It's valued now at about $40 an ounce on the government's balance sheet. And obviously it's about $2,600 an ounce in the open market right now. If they tried to take everyone's gold and pay them $40 an ounce, I think the Supreme Court would regard that as a taking. So it would have fundamentally be a revaluation of gold on their balance sheets and still a taking. So I don't think they could get away with it today. There's some things you can do to try and hedge that, like not telling people you have it in your house. And you
can. Why did you hit us with that 10 minutes ago?
Already did it.
Yeah, sorry for the late advice there, Bobby.
Yeah.
You can also buy historical old U.S. coins because rare coins and collectibles were excluded from the previous taking. But generally speaking, I don't think it's a big risk right now.
So, by the way, look, quick one here. When I think about FDR and we kind of hold them in high esteem because he did. I mean, he helped the United States essentially take over the world. He stayed out of the war until the right exact time to go in. But if you think about his record, forcibly taking people's gold. And I know it wasn't confiscation, but it was the law. Putting 150,000 American citizens who had committed zero crimes into prison. These are some of his legacies. And we still look at him like because FDR also lying his ass off to get us into the war with the thing at the one hotel where he's like, I've got, intelligence that the Germans are going to be invading us through Mexico. And these are all the things they're going to do. Lied his ass off. Is he just a scumbag in you guys' thoughts? That's to both of you, I guess. I know that's not a market question, but we don't have to always be market, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's a total scumbag. I think he was a fairly good wartime president. I think we were going to war with Germany, obviously, regardless at some point. So whatever he could do to preserve Britain in the meantime. But there was a lot of lying and deceit along the way. Also, he's credited with getting the America out of the Great Depression, and when in reality all he did was extend it over and over again. So
the war got us out of the Depression.
Economically, I think that it was he was a scumbag president. What I think we find over time is what the government does best is break things. So it's a lot easier for a president to be a wartime president because all he's doing is trying to bring the force of the government to bear on breaking things. And that's what they do. And that's what the U.S. did, and that's what won World War II, was industrial might of the U.S., which even FDR couldn't tamp down enough, couldn't kill it off.
Bobby, what do you think on that question?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the war part of it. We give a lot of credit to presidents and generals in the U.S. when it's really just a multi-pronged effect if it's done right. Anywhere from Henry Ford building his car, turning his cars into tanks, and the like that happened. So I don't hold him in particular esteem, nor do I dislike him as a historical figure. So I think I'm more opinionless about him.
My neighbor is Japanese, and her grandmother, who comes visits her all the time, was in an internment camp as a child. And I've asked, and they said sure, because I want to sit down with her and speak to her about it, because she's probably about 9 or 10 years old when it happened. And I think that's just a fascinating thing, just like to round up people and put them in jail. So
Yeah.
Anyway, back to markets. So can we hit it on silver here? So silver's had a strong move over the last couple weeks. Do you think now that it's the catch-up trade that often happens with silver? Gold leads the move and then silver catches up in a blink?
Yeah, I think so. Now, we've had a few false starts. Silver, and I just wrote something about this yesterday, actually. Silver has here and there occasionally outperformed gold during this bull market, which began basically March 1st. It has outperformed gold and performed its role, but then it's fallen back. It's popped above $30, fallen right back to 25, 26, 27, then done it again. And now it's done it again. It went straight on a futures basis to 31. This time, I think, is real, and the one that's going to last. Because if you look back to when the market started to price in the Fed pivot, which I think was obvious in gold and obvious in the dollar right around July 1st. If you go back to then, the correlation, inverse correlation between the dollar index and gold is almost exact. -1. It's almost a perfect inverse correlation. And so the dollar has been going down, and it's been hitting that $100 support, just about 100 support rather, and bouncing off of that a couple of times. I think that once we get the pivot behind us, I think the dollar is going to break through that support. And that's going to provide another leg up for both gold and silver, and really get silver finally through the clutches of whatever it's been holding it back from getting to like $34 or $35.
Bobby, I was going to ask you a question real quick, and that's, so markets say 50 basis points tomorrow. Retail sales came out good today. First of all, do you ever remember a time in our careers where we were the day before an FOMC meeting and it was essentially 50-50 on a quarter point move? That's never happened, right? That's not to my memory at all, too.
I'm not going to say it's never happened. Certainly, I don't remember it happening. As a matter of fact, I don't remember a probability of a move being less than 80% anytime in the near future, or in the recent past, I should say. Could have been something that happened in the 90s. I don't remember. I do remember a surprise rate cut in 94. Was that a hike? That might have been a hike.
I remember between meetings. I remember.
Like 50 basis points. So I remember that. That would be the closest thing. And I told a lot of our clients this morning, I said, look, this is one of those that if you can stay away, you should. Because number one, not only do we have to guess what they're going to do, but we have to guess what the response is going to be. And those are two separate things. And I still maintain, I hope they do 25. I really do. Because I think that'll be initially bearish for the stock market and positive for gold. Then I think it's going to be positive for the stock market and positive for gold. And the reason I say that is because the market participants that want them to do 50 will start thinking the Fed's behind the curve, right? And to me, that they'll start buying stocks, and then they'll start buying gold and selling the dollar, thinking that the Fed's going to have to become much more aggressive. Either way, the market has 250 basis points priced in by September of 2025, when we have wages rising, when we have the unemployment rate at 4.2%, when we have retail sales surprising to the upside, weekly red book retail sales higher, credit card debt's high, but it's high versus historical numbers, but that's in aggregate. It's not high in terms of a percentage of the consumer's balance sheet. So overall, the economy is very healthy. And this is, oddly enough, since we're talking to Brien, why I think so highly of gold right now, because they're going to spur inflation again. And The time when the stock market and gold correlate is when there's budding inflation and the Fed is not fighting it. As a matter of fact, they're going to be encouraging it, is my view. So that's probably an 18-month view. But as they cut rates into an economy that's fairly strong and continue to print money under an economy that's at least reasonably strong, I think 3,000 is very easy for gold in the very short term. But I do want to ask about silver, but I think I completely avoided your question.
No, you did mine perfectly though. Brien, you think they're going to cut 50 tomorrow? I know that when you guys are seeing this, they've already gone. The reason I do
Yeah.
is that the market seemed to push that way today. I think they're panicking. What are your thoughts, Brien?
Yeah, I think it's less important what they do is what they say. Powell, most immediately, what he says, how he positions it for the future, because the market's always looking ahead. They don't really care, what happens. And in fact, there is some risk, I think, both for stocks and gold tomorrow in that, they'll buy the rumor, sell the news trade.
But the move today in gold and in Bitcoin, you think was those two markets saying there's going to be 50 tomorrow, right?
I don't know. I mean, gold's down today, and I think that might be a part of the buy the rumor, sell the news type of a thing. That once the thing you have been betting on for so long happens, then you exit the trade. But I think what we're doing is we're switching from what has been arguably the harshest Fed rate hiking cycle ever seen to Fed easing. Now, during that harsh cycle, when the Fed started raising rates, gold has gained $800 an ounce and nearly 45%.
Is that unprecedented, by the way, for it to gain like that in a hiking cycle?
Not really. It was what was rough at the beginning of this hiking cycle was that it kind of coincided with the invasion of Ukraine, which mixed the signal from the market up a whole lot and made it more geopolitical than otherwise. But the Fed the gold has actually responded well. Typically, when the Fed has begun raising rates, in December of 2015, it hit its bottom right before the Fed started rate hikes. And actually, when the Fed made its initial rate hike in mid-December, that marked roughly within a few days the bottom of the gold price at that point.
I'm going to go run and get my Hardcore Italians shirt on while Bobby asks the next question.
On that note, let me say again that they're a sponsor of our show. So if you like this funny stuff, use Futures Edge Finance Unfiltered for 15% off. I want to ask about the gold silver ratio. I don't know if it's something you look at as more of a longer term practitioner of gold as an investment vehicle, but it seems to me that I grew up learning that the gold silver ratio ran historically somewhere around 60. And it has spent a lot of time over, let's say, the last even 2 decades, running quite a bit higher than that. Has it shifted, or is there a time where it's just going to be a snapback where we get the gold silver ratio to closer to where it's been historically, dating back to like 1917?
Yeah, I've never looked at the gold silver ratio as something you can use in trading or a timing indicator. Primarily because it hasn't worked for a long time. It's just a sign, I think, of the relative valuation, the relative upside potential of silver. That said, though, we've seen over the last week, we've seen a spike in gold that has been accompanied by a dramatic outperformance in silver. So if you look at the gold-silver ratio, and it's a chart I put out yesterday, you have a big spike from last week downward in the gold-silver ratio, showing the outperformance of silver. So that is one of the 2 signs that you want to look for as a validation of a gold bull market or a specific gold rally. You want silver outperforming, and you want the mining stocks outperforming. We saw a dramatic outperformance by the major gold stock indices over that same time period. So I think that's an important confirmation. Silver has always outperformed gold. It's always been like a non-expiring call option on gold in a long-term monetarily based bull market for gold. And I think it's going to do that again. Silver's industrial usage has really not helped it over time. It's more than more often than not, provided a stick for the market to beat it with, saying, that we see an economic slowdown, so we're going to sell silver because it's industrial usage. The price of silver is about 95% or thereabouts due to its monetary history. So I don't think the industrial usage has much to play with it. 10 years from now, I think the industrial usage will be a big part of the silver price, but it just isn't there yet. And that's one of the trends we've seen is silver's industrial usage versus monetary usage, one gaining more importance and one losing its importance over the last 10 or 20 years or so. But it's a process, and it's not quite there yet, in my view. But yeah, my view still is if you like gold, and you should, then you should love silver because it will outperform gold dramatically.
Okay, so I got a question for both of you then too. Well, first of all, I got a guy, Hardcore Italian shirt on from our sponsors, Hardcore Italians. By the way, the link is there. I didn't even know I got a guy was an Italian thing because I've been into the I got a guy system my entire adult life. Don't worry about it. I got a guy. He takes care of it.
Buddy, I bought that. Not making a joke. I bought that shirt for my wife so that she could wear it with me.
Oh, I got a guy. Right?
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. I just said to my new neighbor yesterday who was doing his lawn, and I'm like, if you ever, because he's a surgeon too, and I was like, if you ever don't want to do the yard work anymore, he's a kid. I said, I got a guy for that stuff, and I'm just like, oh shit, I do say I got a guy all the time. We need to talk about Bitcoin, and we haven't yet. So, Brien, this goes to you. So, do you see Bitcoin as like an interloper? Do you see Bitcoin as possibly being a complementary asset to hold with gold and silver, just as a acknowledgement of this awful stewardship of our currency with the drunken sailor spending? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts, well, the big problem I have with Bitcoin is the fact that I didn't buy it 10 years ago.
No doubt about it. Right?
Yeah, that's hard for me emotionally to get over that, full disclosure. But, Bitcoin's original mission was similar to gold, to give you independence, anonymity, transparency, and primarily independence from the government-based financial system and monetary system. And since then, it's been a victim of its own success and attracted more speculators who then adopted the mission as their mantra, as it were, but they really just want the price to go up. And so they're trying to get more and more people involved in it. And as part of that, they're trying to get underneath the regulatory umbrella so that they can get the big money into Bitcoin. And in doing that, they're giving up a lot of the supposed advantages of anonymity, which apparently doesn't apply any longer. Transparency, which is, a double-edged sword. Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on it. I think right now it is a speculator's tool, and that's about it. It doesn't have the adoption. But that said, some very smart people that I respect a lot, I've had very in-depth discussions with, and they are total Bitcoin maxis. And I have to respect that, the fact that very smart people and people who are good faith actors believe in it. And so that's what gives me pause in my skepticism, as it were.
Yeah, I increased my position when BlackRock, Vanguard, Van Eck all started increasing their footprint in it. I think if BlackRock does something and gets into it, because I do, you say whatever sinister things you want, but I do think they are overlords. And if they're in it, I don't think it's going away. Bobby, do you have thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I wonder, I don't remember who said it, if it was Tom Luongo or Bob Elliott, but one of them said, obviously if there's a Trump victory, Bitcoin will get a lift from that because he's sort of been the crypto candidate to date. We don't know if he's going to follow through with any of that. But the idea that the U.S. Treasury could buy Bitcoin and hold it as an asset, they may not be able to buy enough of it. And I thought that was an interesting point because that A, argues for Bitcoin to go to $1 million, but B, also argues that the government could say, well, we're not going to use this because we just can't get enough at a fair price. You could imagine a situation where the government buys up Bitcoin to $500,000 a coin, and then it drops like tulips, right? Where it's just goes down to nothing because no one owns it anymore except the government. And obviously I'm being hyperbolic there, but I was curious about that. I trade Bitcoin. I hold a very small amount of it. Relatively speaking, I own a lot more gold than I own Bitcoin. But it's just one of those things. Like I'm really buying something that I'm not comfortable
But the
with, and I
governments buy
struggle with
gold
that.
too. All the governments buy gold.
No, I understand that, but like, there's enough gold, right?
Well, no, there's enough
And
of everything at the right price. Well, you alluded to that, of course, too.
that's my fear, is that the government buys it all, and then because Bitcoin's finite, it's just all being held with the government. And then what is it? Like, what would, not all of it, obviously,
Right.
but if there's only going to be 1,000,000 Bitcoin, and
Well, if it's 21 million Bitcoin and it goes to $1 million, isn't that
1,000,000 Bitcoin.
210 trillion dollars? No, am I doing that wrong? No,
I'm
21,
not even going to. I'm not even going
21
to attempt that.
trillion dollars of Bitcoin if it went to $1 million. So yeah,
Yeah, if
I may
somebody
have done
said
that
it's
math wrong.
so
Sorry.
centrally held, I don't remember if it was Bob Elliott or Tom Luongo. They said that like the majority of Bitcoin is held by maybe 10 major institutions or people, and they could basically hold the price wherever they want, as opposed to gold, which is a market.
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I nuts?
I
Brian,
don't
what do you
think you're
think?
nuts. You, Brian?
The primary similarity I see between gold and Bitcoin is the religious fervor of its advocates. It really is.
You're counting that as a negative, right?
Uh, I guess so. Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Not to Peter Schiff, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Peter's a friend of mine, and I can tell you that he believes every word he says.
Yeah, I believe he does.
And he can give you a lot of those words too. But yeah, but gold has the history behind it, and a lot of, it's with just about everything. A lot of the disadvantages can also be regarded as advantages. Yes, it's physical. You can't carry it on a jump drive, or a password in your head, and it's not that portable. But that's also an advantage in that it's harder to steal electronically, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and the power goes out. So there, we could go on for a long time on that, but the goals of Bitcoin, I think, were similar to the goals of gold, and you can tell that by the physical representations of Bitcoin always look like a gold coin.
I don't.
And it's called the digital gold, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't buy that it's not portable. I don't buy that it's not portable. I did a video for a client who was asking me what I thought was one of the biggest myths of gold. And I said, the portability of it. And I took about, in the video, I said it was somebody else's gold, but it was mine. I took about, at the time, I want to say it was maybe 20 gold coins in a little container about this big.
Yeah.
They were 1 ounce gold coins. And I said, look, I can put each one of these in my pocket, and I've got about $80,000 on me. And, if things get so bad that $80,000 is not enough, then gold's worth a lot more than
gold's going to triple, right?
in my pocket. Like, I understand there's probably no scenario you can carry $100 million in gold, in your car somewhere. But I'm telling you, if Bitcoin gets to that sort of a value level because of crisis, there's no power. So you can't it's still on your drive or in your wallet, but you can't use it. You can't transfer it to anybody. So I don't buy that it's not portable. I know that's not your opinion, Brian. I know you were just sort of bringing that up as one of the negatives.
I agree with what you're saying. I think that's been a knock on it, that it isn't as portable as Bitcoin. But it is always there, and Bitcoin isn't necessarily always there. If you have a situation where you don't have access to your computer power or somebody who can accept Bitcoin.
We can go back to the F-16 example, Jimmy.
Yeah.
If somebody blows your F-16 or your house up with an F-16, as President Biden theoretically threatened, something the size of this or smaller that has my Bitcoin on it is gone.
But I want to know now, if you sew gold into your pants, into your coat, how much can you comfortably carry? Because my guess is it's right even now about $250,000 worth of gold that I could sew into my leather jacket. I might get hot on the airplane, and I'm not taking that thing off. But I think you could put $250,000 on your body and walk comfortably. And you know the story about the Romanovs, right? When they went to kill the 2 little girls.
Yeah.
When they had to kill them, and the bullets were bouncing off them because they had their golden jewelry all over in their clothing.
They supposedly had a diamond corset.
Diamond corset, is that what it was?
Being worn by Anastasia.
No, it was both, Jimmy.
Yeah.
I heard
you could do $250,000 of gold. That's 100 ounces, 100 troy ounces of gold.
Yeah,
Um,
I can carry that easy.
you could carry that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Why do you think we lift weights so much and work out, Jimmy?
Damn
So
right.
we can
Yeah.
carry our gold.
Right. Yes.
Anyway, I'm not really knocking Bitcoin. I'm more pointing out that there's a lot of things about Bitcoin I don't understand. I believe I understand everything I need to about gold. And if that makes me a Fox News gold shill, then whatever.
Yeah. And again,
My
but
risk, not
I think
yours.
all of us, one of the things we all like gold about, I'm going to ask you both to comment on this too. Same reason I like real estate. We have, and you guys were covering this as I sat down, we have zero confidence in the ability of our government and their stewardship of the currency. They are accumulating $1 trillion of new debt every 85 days currently. In 2025, the debt service payment is going to be $1.4 trillion. They only collect $4.5 trillion in taxes so far. So it's literally, it's more than a quarter of what they're in. So my dollar hedge portfolio, and I'm going to ask you guys to comment on this, is gold, which I've said a million times over the last 2.5 years has worked well, is real estate. I'm a real estate investor, not just my home. Silver, it's copper. It has not been a good trade, but okay. Platinum. Bobby, you said palladium, and I haven't moved into that yet, but I'm considering it. But I want to make sure the real estate part stays in there too. Is there any part you like of that more than others besides the gold part, Brien?
Palladium is making a move right now. I think palladium and platinum are grouped into precious metals, but they really are industrial metals. Precious metals to me have some monetary heritage or value, and I think that's long gone for platinum and palladium. They are really high-end industrial metals, and they each have their own stories because of that. Real estate is great. It benefits from high inflation environments. You can only get hurt if you speculate and buy wrong and leverage. But yeah, real estate's a great way. Physical, I think we are making a transition from financial more toward commodity and real and tangible assets having value, because I think the inflation story is not done, and you understand, or we can understand, that debts mean that these debt loads mean that currencies will have to be depreciated at an accelerated rate in the future. So that means any real things, tangible investments, gold, silver, commodities, copper is a great story for the long term. You have ways to leverage it because you know how to trade. But in my area where we're looking at mining stocks, it's less explosive as, say, gold and silver, because a big discovery of copper is going to take 2 decades to come on stream. It's going to take, you have to dilute yourself because they're so large, et cetera, et cetera. So, but copper is a great story for other reasons. It's, the whole electrification and rebuilding of the electrical grid.
But I'd say if someone is watching this show and you're looking for a couple takeaways, what Brien just said is a monster takeaway. Just get your calculator out. Mathematically, the debt loads that we have on the federal level, state levels of the big 5 states, one I'm sitting in right now, are completely impossible to manage unless the currency is significantly weakened over the next, let's call it 10-year period. You can make the argument that that's what happened. We do make the argument that that's what Japan did. They saw the supply chains locking up. They were in a deflationary spiral for 3 decades, and they were like, crap, we can hit the gas right here and potentially get us out of the problems that we had for the last 3 decades. I contend without any question that the U.S. did that too, to a lesser extent, obviously, but they took the opportunity to inject $7 trillion into the economy to try to lessen the debt loads by monetizing the debt so people have to pay back with cheaper dollars. And that's what Brien said there. And that's brilliant, because what's happened over the last couple of years is all those indebted government entities, they didn't take care and clean house. All they did was double down. And all that's not any kind of conspiracy theory. That's just the math on this. There is no way that the system works unless we consistently devalue the dollar. So please take that away. And I didn't mean to go on my little diatribe there, though. Bobby, how much longer? You want to play them out soon or no?
I'll go 5-6 minutes. I wanted to point something out real quick that when I said that if an F-16 bombs and blows up your house, your Bitcoin is gone, it obviously still exists on the blockchain. So I just turned 58. I can't remember a code that long. So I would have to have
26
multiple
words, right?
Yeah, I would have to have it in multiple places or figure out some sort of mnemonic I could use to remember
Just the
my
first 26 words to a song, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Your gold is still around too, Bobby.
Your gold is still there. That's the one thing. I
You're
know
not
where to
now,
find
but
that.
your gold is.
If I could dig through the rubble before they could, I could find my gold. There's no
Now,
doubt
not only
about
do you need a fireproof safe, you need a F-15 proof safe in your home. Can you believe when he came on TV and literally threatened the American people with F-15s? Like,
that.
oh, you're going to fight the government with that? Good luck. Oh, shut up. God, that made me so mad.
And that pilot is going to fire on American citizens
Yeah, right. You have
Yeah.
to worry about
at
that
his
too.
request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is
So I
absurd.
want to ask you something that I wanted to ask you at the start of the show, and it just slipped my mind. I have a friend / relative who has quite a bit of gold and silver coins he's been collecting over his lifetime. He's in his 70s. And some of them are not just typical American Eagles that you would go buy now, and everybody's seen them all over the place. Some of them are pretty interesting, like, Mercury had dimes all in silver, and in certain Indian head silver coins, they're minted in like 1910, and all these different coins that they're just different looking and they're old. And he asked me to look into the value of them to see if there's value over and above their weight in precious metals. And I brought to him, the first person I talked to said most of those are just basically weight coins. And there was not much after that. And he said, do you trust them? I said, I don't know. I have no idea if I trust them. I mean, it'd be difficult to find out if somebody told you, it's worth nothing. It's actually worth 10 times the physical amount. So what advice do you have for people like that? We do have older listeners who I'm sure their grandfather, their father, whatever, has maybe gold and silver coins lying around that they just saved. How do you find actual value of these things outside of their weight in metal?
Yeah, well, there's two things that make a coin rare or numismatically valuable. It's really scarcity, and it's scarcity either because of the date and mint mark or because of the condition of the coin. And date and mint mark, you can look online. You can go to the Red Book and online, or buy a copy in a bookstore if there are such a thing anymore. And you can tell if that's a rare date of the coin, and it potentially has more value. Condition is a different thing. You have to get it graded. And most coin dealers can tell you, well, this is a coin that is high condition. This is a coin that you can submit for grading. It costs X amount of dollars, et cetera, et cetera. But then do you trust the coin dealer? That's the key we want to get at. A few things I tell people: go to 3 dealers, make sure they're members of the Professional Numismatist Guild, PNG.
What was that word?
Numismatist.
Yeah, numismatists, rare coin collectors. If they're
I'm not
members
shocked
of
I didn't know what that word meant, but I am shocked Jimmy could say it. Go ahead, Brien.
This is my shock face as well. But yeah, PNG, if they're a member of PNG, they're probably reputable. But regardless, go to 3 dealers. Go online, see if it's a rare date and mint mark. And as step one, but then find a reputable dealer who's a member of PNG. Find a few of them and kind of cross-sell it. See if they tend to agree on the value and whether it should be submitted for grading. And always tell a dealer, what is this coin worth? Not what will you pay me, because those are 2 different questions or 2 different answers typically. But what is it worth? And you can find out with a little detective work whether it's really in very good condition, or what else might make it worth more than just its bullion value.
There's another takeaway too, is that there is a lot of golden coin dealers around. If you find one that you truly do trust, first of all, question yourself and truly trust them. But if the answer is yes, hold on to them like grim death, because there is a ton of people in that business that will take advantage of you, in my opinion. Bobby, about a year ago, we had Amelia on, and she works for the Diamond Company. Remember? By the way, we have not mentioned diamonds since then, and I have a theory as to why. I believe my daughter got married a month ago. I never asked. She has a beautiful diamond ring. My daughter is extremely practical and extremely not materialistic. My guess, just a guess, is that is a lab-grown diamond on her finger. The same with my niece, who is even a little bit more materialistic. Not you, Melissa. I'm talking about another niece, who has what I think is a lab-grown diamond on her finger as well. My question is this: are diamonds is because of this phenomenon? Are diamonds something we're not going to talk about anymore as a real portable store of value?
I think it's a real challenge for the diamond market. It started off, the lab grown diamonds were, a good jeweler could tell the difference, and they were priced at 80% of a regular diamond. Now those numbers have kind of flipped. I have a friend of mine who's a jeweler that specializes in diamonds. He says he cannot tell the difference. He says with a microscope, he can't tell the difference. He has people that work for him that can tell the difference. But that's what you have to get to be able to tell the difference. So when you see someone who has a diamond the size that isn't commensurate with what you think they can afford, then it's most likely a lab-grown diamond.
Which, by the way, with my daughter, she can afford it. They pay her a shit ton of money, and I think her husband makes money too. I just think she is not someone who would drop 10 grand on a diamond. But again, I talk to my daughters about anything, but that's not one thing I talk to them about.
Well, you just talked to about 8,000 people about it, so we'll see if it kind of gets to you.
Can you guys just not tell them I talked about it at all?
But yeah, it's a big thing. It really is, and it's a totally different market now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they actually start to push the rarity of natural versus lab grown. But if what Brien says is true, and I have no reason to believe it's not, that you're getting to the point where jewelry experts, trained or not, can't tell the difference. I mean, one of the things that was always a friend of mine who was a jeweler said is it's just so rare in a common setting to find a perfect diamond. And a lot of the lab grown diamonds are perfect.
Right.
So the second you see a perfect diamond, you're like, okay, this is spurious.
Exactly.
Right. There's
they
a problem.
Start
here.
lab growing imperfect diamonds if they want them to blend in.
It would not shock me if they're doing that. And it would not shock me if there's already overseas operations, not being racist, overseas operations that are doing that and selling them as real. It wouldn't shock me one bit. So that in and of itself, I think, goes to the risk you described, Jimmy, and what Brien so eloquently stated was that it's tough for the diamond market.
That's why we don't talk about it or touch it. And I love Amelia, but I'm just not sure.
She doesn't work there anymore anyway.
So she doesn't. Oh, good. Then the hell with diamonds. This has been the Futures Edge. I'm Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. That's Brien Lundin, who is the editor of the Gold Newsletter and Grand Poobah of the New Orleans Investment Conference, which is in its 50th year. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
50 years, the oldest investment conference in the world, the most well-attended. Now I'm going to start lying. The first part about it being the oldest is true, but everything else from here is going to be lying. The most well-attended by good-looking people. That is a proven fact. That's in with the Investment Conference Daily, the newspaper. Yeah. But anyway, so please join us there. I will be speaking there. Dave Collum, who, if you've ever heard him speak, it is a wild ride. Who's the headliner? Jim Grant this year?
Yeah, Jim Grant so far is the headliner. I don't know who could beat him.
I can't imagine there's anyone who's better to speak than Jim Grant. When I become president, he is going to be my head economist. So I'm glad for that. Provided Larry Kudlow doesn't want to take it because he's too old. But not that you're too old now, Larry. But anyway, I'll stop talking before I piss everybody off. This has been the Futures Edge. None of this works without you guys and your support. Thank you so much for all the DMs, all the retweets. Tell your friends. You guys are the best. Remember what Bobby and I are trying to do. We were in legacy media for a long time. Legacy media didn't fit us. You know why? Because we like to give honest opinions and not have to massage them at the whims of sponsors or overzealous producers. We will not do that anymore. We're trying to build a platform where people give their honest opinions. Our opinions may be wrong, but they're honest opinions. And one thing you have to admit is that we've been in business in media for 20 years. You might think we're bullshit, but we get some great guests. Brien is one of them. Special thanks. And if you guys like independent journalism, Hardcore Italians is a sponsor of us. 15% off if you go through our link. If you want to support independent journalism, if you want to support us, please look at their stuff. Please purchase something if you like it. There's some Halloween stuff. There's one that says Gabagool with a hand like this, which is fantastic. And ghoul spelled like a ghost, Ghoul, which I think is perfect. And I ordered it already, but it hasn't gotten here yet. But again, thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to you guys. This is the Futures Edge.